Amazing. Unexpected encounter. How a poor girl's touching words saved a billionaire's life forever. Sarah held her sketchbook close, fingers trembling as she watched the steam from the soup kitchen serving line curl into the chilly air. Drawing had always been her escape, a colorful refuge from the gray demands of her life. Balancing high school, a part-time job, and the care of her two younger siblings often left her breathless, the pressure thick enough to feel. But here, amidst the clattering pots and voices echoing off the walls, she couldn't shake the sense that her art was stranded in a world she could barely touch. The warmth of the kitchen's turmoil couldn't soften the relentless thoughts racing in her mind. She wanted to be an artist, to breathe life and color onto canvas, yet the bills never ended. The whirring cacophony of responsibilities dulled her dreams. Could she really pursue art when survival gnawed at her family every day? Even her sketchbook, filled with vibrant colors and hopeful illustrations, seemed like a cruel reminder of all that was out of reach. Amidst her musings, her eyes landed on a man seated alone, an unfamiliar presence among the bustling volunteers. Jonathan, she learned later, chose to remove himself from the world of lavish parties and superficial connections. But seated there, veiled in shadows of indecision, he looked just as lost as she felt. Their paths crossed later that day as he caught sight of her sketches, instinctively drawn to the emotions that overflowed from the page. In a moment fueled by equal parts bravery and desperation, she ventured toward him, fear bubbling in her throat. "Would you like to see some?" she asked weakly, already regretting her words. But as he nodded, Sarah's heart quickened, an uncertain thrill mingling with the heavy weight on her chest. What did he see in her art? She reminded herself of her mother's quiet words, to embrace opportunity even when it felt daunting. Before the moment could collapse under the pressure, he leaned in, studying each image with an intensity that made her fingers twitch nervously. Their brief talks erupted into deeper discussions filled with honesty. She felt a flicker of recognition, mirroring his own struggles of isolation and a life punctuated by hollow relationships. But beneath the surface, the cracks in their lives were sharper than ever, threatening to dig deeper. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Their bond flourished through a shared honesty that both excited and terrified her. But Sarah sensed Jonathan teetering on the edge of uncertainty, his self-worth entwined with his wealth. After a particularly raw conversation about sacrifice and dreams, a wave of hope ignited within her. She felt powerful, invigorated by the belief that perhaps she could guide him to see the picture beyond his gilded cage. But the deeper they connected, the more her fears morphed into whispers of self-doubt. Could she truly help him, or was her own ambition destined to fade under the weight of his despair? The tension stretched like a taut string, a palpable presence hanging between them. Jonathan needed support, but was she truly capable of being his lifeline? The stakes elevated as their friendship wound tighter. Every moment felt charged, but uncertainty clouded their journey. As Jonathan's internal struggles surged and her own dreams hung in the balance, Sarah found herself caught in an emotional storm, wondering whether she held the strength to navigate both their fates, or if her light would extinguish in the shadows of his turmoil. Would her voice resonate enough to spark change, or would it drown under the persistent echo of despair? Every moment spent in Jonathan's presence felt electrifying, yet fraught with an uncomfortable uncertainty. They continued to meet at the soup kitchen, finding solace in shared stories and laughter. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their connection was hanging by a thread. Each time their eyes met, a flood of emotions coursed through her. Hope, fear, vulnerability, all swirling around like a tempest just waiting to break. As days turned into weeks, Sarah's sketchbook expanded with new illustrations sparked by their conversations. Fueled by the passion she felt in their discussions, her artistic voice began to blossom, weaving deeper narratives into her drawings. But while her artistic growth surged, Jonathan's tormented soul seemed to drift further from her reach, trapped beneath the weight of societal expectations. One fateful evening, Sarah faced a moral dilemma. At their usual meeting spot, she noticed Jonathan's turbulent expression as he picked at his meal, each bite becoming a struggle against his own thoughts. Should she confront the crux of his despair and risk shattering the fragile bond they had nurtured, or remain silent, watch him unravel, all while her own ambition flickered like a dying flame? As she weighed her options, she saw the sketches she had brought with her, illuminated by the fading light. They pulsed with her truth, her experiences, her dreams, her growth. In a bold burst of determination, she flipped to a fresh page and began to draw. With each stroke of the pencil, she poured her heart onto the canvas, channeling her fears for Jonathan alongside her yearning for her own artistic success. "Jonathan," she called gently, breaking his daze as he lifted his gaze. The flicker of surprise on his face spurred her onward. "I want to show you this one." She turned the sketch toward him, a simple yet poignant illustration of hands reaching out to each other. Other across a chasm. It's not just about art to me. It's about connection. It represents what I feel we've built. His eyes softened as he took in her creation, reflecting the depth of unvoiced emotions. The silence hung between them, vibrating with intensity, as Sarah's heart raced, daring him to breach the walls he meticulously maintained. "You think we can reach each other?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper, thick with an emotional burden that cut through the air. "I do," she replied, her heart pounding. "But you need to let me in. Let us in. Your struggles matter, Jonathan, as much as mine do. We're not so different, you and I." Her words hung heavy in the air, a bridge of honesty stretching between them. The raw truth cascaded from her, and suddenly she felt the jarring weight of vulnerability lifting. Jonathan's guarded demeanor began to crack, allowing flickers of sincerity to break through as his defenses quivered under the light of her conviction. But in that moment, as the tension mounted, so did the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Would Jonathan allow her into the depths of his struggles? As they teetered on the brink of profound change, Sarah felt the stakes elevate further. Her ability to support him hinged upon her willingness to confront her own fears, a reflection of their intertwined destinies. "You have to ask yourself what you truly want, Jonathan," she implored, daring him to confront the truth. "Do you want to remain lost in this gilded cage, or is it time to find your freedom?" The air crackled with anticipation as his response hung suspended in the balance. Would he break free from his self-imposed shackles, or would he retreat back into the shadows? All Sarah could do was hold her breath and await his decision, knowing that this moment would either illuminate their path or plunge them deeper into uncertainty. The stakes were no longer just about her. They were tied to the heart of someone she believed could spark extraordinary change in both their lives. The moment of choice approached, and the air thickened with possibility. Would they dare to leap, together or apart? As the tension lingered in the air, Sarah watched Jonathan's expression morph from uncertainty to a spark of realization. He seemed to weigh her words. The internal struggle was palpable, transforming his hesitance into a daunting introspection. Her own heart quickened. She had dared to reveal a piece of her truth, but was he ready to return the favor? Just as Jonathan opened his mouth to respond, a siren echoed from outside, momentarily breaking the spell between them. Sarah's mind raced. How long had they walked this tightrope of unspoken fears? Minutes? Hours? She could feel that the fate of their connection hinged on this very moment. She had already laid bare her yearning, but would he reciprocate with honesty, or retreat behind the walls he had so carefully constructed? "Sarah," he finally said, his voice firmer than before, "I've built my life around expectations. There's comfort in conformity, in what others perceive as success. But every time we meet, I feel like I'm inching closer to something I can't fully grasp." His admission sent a rush of empowerment through her. He was speaking her language now, the emotional chain they had begun forging suddenly appearing more tangible. "You don't have to fit into their mold," she urged. "You are more than the sum of others' opinions. There's a spark in you that deserves freedom. What if we could redefine what success means? What if we could rebuild, together?" With tentative hope, Sarah reached out, brushing his hand gently with hers. It was a small, delicate movement, but the electric charge of it sent a shiver of warmth coursing through both their bodies. They sat there, fingers lingering for a moment, feeling that connection pulse through them, a binding force that neither had anticipated. Jonathan closed his eyes, and Sarah could almost see the gears turning in his mind. "But what if I fail?" His voice cracked with the weight of possibility and fear. "What if I lose everything?" Her heart pounded. The fear of failure resonated with her. She had danced with that specter countless times. But the question echoed more profoundly in Jonathan's case, because it encompassed more than merely societal expectations. "Maybe," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor inside. "But failing means learning. It means evolving. What's worse, living a lie or facing the risks that may lead you to discover who you truly are?" They sat there, suspended in silence again, but this time it felt different. The possibilities felt tangible, as if they were standing at the edge of a precipice, staring into the swirling depths of change. Could Jonathan find the courage to plunge into that unknown? Would he be willing to embrace vulnerability, to dismantle the cage that held him confined? Sarah felt the overwhelming urge to reach out further, to encourage his burgeoning resolve. She needed to align her narrative with his, to potentially catalyze change not only for him, but for herself as well. "Let's not shy away from the dark corners, Jonathan. Let's keep exploring together." In that moment, she could sense his determination building, a simmering tide ready to rise. But just as she envisioned the path forward, another complication loomed on the horizon. Would the world allow them both the space to grow? Or would the weight of Jonathan's past drag them down? As Jonathan inhaled deeply and seemed ready to respond, suddenly his phone vibrated sharply on the table, shattering the fragile moment as he glanced at the screen. His expression shifted immediately, a stark reminder of the outside pressures they faced. "Sarah, I need to take this," he stammered, looking genuinely torn between the urgency of the call and the moment they were sharing. Her heart sank, knowing how easily the world could interrupt progress. She nodded, trying to mask her disappointment. "Take your time," she said, attempting to maintain a facade of calm while inside she felt the change slipping away. As he answered the call, the tension in the room spiraled into an uneasy stillness, and Sarah realized that the moment of truth would have to wait. But what if the call held news that would alter the stakes even further? What if the world beyond them would present a challenge neither were prepared for? The uncertainty of this new possibility hung heavy in the air, pushing her to an unsettling brink. Their journey was far from over, and yet the clouds were gathering on the horizon. Would they find their way through the impending storm, or would it sweep them apart when they were so close to defining their fate? As Jonathan's voice transformed into a muted buzz against the backdrop of Sarah's racing thoughts, she leaned back, her fingers gently withdrawing from his. The warmth vanished, leaving her with a hollow ache as the unshed words still danced in her mind. It felt like a lifeline severed, and the looming uncertainty began to cloud her spirit once more. She watched Jonathan's face morph from curiosity into a tense focus, his brows furrowed as he navigated whatever tempest brewed on the other end of the phone. His responses were clipped, peppered with urgency that unnerved her. She questioned the extent to which this call held him captive, feeling a creeping sense of impatience surge within her. As he spoke, Sarah battled with her own thoughts. Pushing back against her growing despair, she recalled the essence of their earlier conversation, the exhilarating potential they had unearthed in one another. Could she hold on to that sense of possibility in Jonathan's absence? Or was her investment in his transformation merely a reflection of her own yearning for change? The silence of the room felt suffocating as she stared at him, waiting. In that moment, she understood the profound impact relationships could have. They could either propel growth or anchor you in place. Her heart thudded as she thought of her own choices. Every conversation, every connection could either affirm or challenge her journey. Jonathan returned to her, his expression somber as he ended the call. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice steady but weary. "That was my father. He needs me to come to the office immediately." A fresh wave of apprehension washed over her at the mention of his father, a looming figure in Jonathan's life that she had heard about but never met. This was the man who dictated Jonathan's path, who held him mercilessly within a web of expectations. What did he want? She pressed, reluctant to let the moment dissolve into shadows of responsibility. "He wants to discuss a new business venture," Jonathan replied, running a hand through his hair, a telltale sign of stress that made her heart ache. "He thinks I should be focusing on this instead of whatever this is." "Whatever this," she repeated, a rush of frustration bubblant à la surface. "Tu mènes la part où vivrais actuellement connecté, où tu étais considérant qui tu réellement es et non merement billant ce que lui veut?" Il looked taken aback momentanément, words hanging between them like heavy clouds. "It's not that simple, Sarah," Jonathan said, shaking his head as if trying to shake off her words. "I can't just turn my back on it all. There are people depending on me." "Are they, Jonathan?" she challenged, emboldi par le way their conversation avait fleuri before the interruption. "Ou as-tu juste convaincu toi-même que tu ôtes de lion tes épagnes?" Those words hung en l'air, weighty et charged. Jonathan's eyes searched hers, his own turmoil reflected back, as if he were teetering on le verge de révélation yet again. Mais en lieu de répondre, il looked away, son expression inscrutable. This stark silence swelled with unresolved tension, yet Sarah felt an ember de détermination glow within her. Whatever doubts il harborait, she wouldn't let them extinguish the flame they had initiated together. She needed to draw on that burgeoning courage, even as a haunting thought lodged itself in her mind. What if this conversation didn't lead to clarity, mais to another heartbreak? "Listen," she finalement said, her voix steady. "You have to be honest avec toi-même. This moment, not moment, il est juste as vital que ni business deal. Your growth matters. You matter." Jonathan met her gaze again, un flicker de hope mingling with the shadows of doubt. "Et si je choisis de confronter ça? Then tu finalement be stepping into your own light," she replied, knowing the stakes now rested not only in his hands, mais aussi en her willingness to explore her own fears and desires. But as he processed her words, she couldn't shake the nagging question de whether he'll make that leap. Et s'il ne dit pas, où chaillera la force de laisser la door ouverte par elle-même, où voudra son décision tailler à un paste qu'elle désespérément vichait escaper? As Jonathan ouvrait sa mop à parler, le fond's vibration qui avait en fois disrupté leur connexion came la vie again, his screen lighting up avec another name.
Sorry, I have to take this, il said, son ton apologétique, yet beckoning her into the unknown once more. Un inerce churnait within Sarah as she saw him slip back dans le rêve de external pression. Would leur moment de potentiel slip through the cracks once more, laissant les deux flambant dans un sea de unambiguë expectation. She felt l'impending storm cloud their connexion, mais she knew le struggle was still to come. Les stakes continuaient to rise, voudrait dire confronter leurs conflictants worlds, ou voudra fat draw them floor apart when change hung tantalisamment close. As Jonathan tournait patenel col, Sarah felt l'air dans la pièce changer, tic avec pression et incertitude. La warme connexion qu'il avait juste commencé à forger dima dans la sombre de son impendante
obligations, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. She sank deeper into herself, wrestling with the duality of her feelings, supporting him, yet feeling increasingly invisible. With each passing moment of silence, Sarah's thoughts raced. The spark of inspiration that had burned brightly just moments ago now flickered uncertainly. Her desire to encourage Jonathan clashed violently with her fear of being dismissed, of watching him retreat into a life scripted by others. What about her own journey? What about her desire for autonomy, for a life that was not dictated by outside forces? She picked at her fingernails, her mind racing through scenarios. The phone call could either tether Jonathan further to his father's expectations or present an opportunity for him to assert his independence. What would it take for him to embrace that growth, to confront the very fabric of his identity? Sarah felt her heart race just imagining the possibilities, yet the anxiety of potential rejection clawed at her chest. Jonathan's voice returned to her ears, punctuated by short, tense exchanges. Each response he gave seemed to tether him further into a world where he was inadequate without the blueprint his father laid out for him. The urgency in his voice turned her thoughts dark. Was there any real hope for them? She inhaled deeply as she steeled herself to take action. The intensity of her conflicting emotions morphed into a resolve. She would not let this moment pass idly. She had wrestled with her own identity for too long to let another opportunity for connection slip through her fingers. Standing up, she paced around the room, her thoughts coalescing into a plan. She couldn't force Jonathan to confront his father's grip over him, but she could offer her unwavering support as he navigated this difficult terrain. And while she didn't have all the answers, she was determined to confront her own fears. She had to communicate clearly what was at stake, not just for him, but also for herself. The phone call felt endless. She glanced at him, wishing he could hear the thoughts raging within her. Yet somewhere inside her, she felt an unexpected surge of confidence. She wouldn't let Jonathan's struggles decide their fates. Instead, she could harness this experience as a foundation for her own empowerment. Whatever lay ahead, her growth mattered just as much as his. Jonathan finally ended the call, his face shadowed and conflicted as he returned to her. Whatever weight lay upon him reflected back at her, and she steeled herself to speak. "It's okay. I understand you need to take care of your responsibilities. But what about us, Jonathan? What about your happiness? This moment we shared, it counts too." He shifted, absorbing her words, and for a fleeting instant his eyes glimmered with recognition. "You're right, Sarah, but how do I even begin to change that?" Gripping the edge of the table, she searched for the right words, driven by an urgency that pushed clarity to the forefront of her thoughts. "You start by acknowledging your worth, Jonathan. You're not just an extension of your father's dreams. You are your own person with your own aspirations." His eyes widened, and she could tell that this was a turning point. Take a step back and reevaluate. What do you want outside of their expectations? Her heart raced with anticipation, the answer looming like a beacon on the horizon, unknown yet enticing. But just as hope began to blossom in Jonathan's expression, the reality of the situation threatened to pull them apart once again. The buzzing of his phone echoed ominously, heralding yet another interruption. "Can you excuse me for a moment? It might be important," he said, his voice absent as he grabbed his phone. Sarah watched him walk away, her stomach in knots. The talk they could have had was slipping away. Fear crept back in, not just about losing Jonathan, but about ignoring her journey into the unknown, the steps she was ready to take for her own growth. Would she be strong enough to claim her independence, regardless of Jonathan's choices? As she wondered about her own answers, the uncertainty loomed larger than before. Was it time for her to pursue her ambitions, irrespective of this impending heartbreak? The moment felt critical, and as Jonathan stepped back into the conversation with an expression of confusion and distress, her resolve hardened within. The game was shifting, and she hadn't yet begun to play in earnest. Would this be the moment she took charge, or did she risk becoming a mere player in his ongoing drama? The stakes grew higher every second, and the decisions bubbled dangerously close to the surface, begging for a reckoning. With a shaky breath, Sarah knew it was time to confront not just Jonathan's obstacles, but her own fears too. Would they emerge transformed from their struggles, or would one of them falter before the bitter end? As Jonathan returned, the weight in his eyes seemed heavier, and Sarah felt the imminent sense of urgency thrum through her. She recognized this peculiar tension born from their unfinished conversation, a confrontation looming just out of reach. He settled into a chair, visibly shaken, the phone still buzzing intermittently on the table between them. "Sorry about that," he muttered, his voice lacking the conviction it had moments before. The words hung there, thick and unsatisfying, like an unfinished thought. Sarah's heart raced, yet she focused not on the turmoil between them, but the opportunity ahead. This moment was hers to steer. "Jonathan, we need to talk, not just about your family, but about us, about what we want for our lives." His gaze drifted to the floor, as if the weight of their future pressed down from above. "What if I don't know what I want?" he confessed, vulnerability cracking through his facade. That raw admission sparked something within her. She realized that they were at a crossroads not just for their relationship, but for their individual paths. "Then let's figure it out together," she proposed, her voice steady. "We can't keep sidestepping our dreams for the comfort of others' expectations." For the first time, she saw his defenses begin to soften, his features transforming into a canvas of inner conflict and the flickering of potential clarity. Jonathan was grappling not just with his father's ambitions, but also with who he truly aspired to be. As she spoke, a revelation sparked in her mind. This wasn't solely a discussion about their relationship. This was about self-discovery, an unearthing of both their aspirations. She had often settled for shadows of herself, dulled by the expectations she felt weighing down her own dreams. If she truly wanted to support Jonathan, she must start embracing her ambitions too. "Let's make a list," Sarah suggested. "What do we both want and what is stopping us? Maybe once we lay everything out, we can see clearly how to move forward." Jonathan's brow furrowed, skepticism creeping back in. "A list? Really?" "It's practical. It's right there in black and white," she urged, her enthusiasm buoying her. "You have to start somewhere, right?" With a reluctant nod, Jonathan picked up a pen, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a tangible step towards reclaiming agency over his own life. As they began scribbling ideas and digging deep into their respective goals, Sarah felt an electrifying shift occur. The act of listing out their desires transformed from a simple task into a reflection of endless possibilities. Each item they wrote stirred something alive within her, illuminating pathways previously obscured by doubt. "I want to travel," Jonathan said hesitantly as he jotted down bullet points. "I want the freedom to do what I love and not just what's expected." Yes, that's it, Sarah erupted, her pulse racing with excitement. You have so much more to offer the world than just what your family seeks. Her acknowledgement seemed to reinvigorate him. Jonathan's previous frustrations began to morph into possibilities as he continued walking through his thoughts, her support emerging as a catalyst for his liberation. Yet, despite their shared moments of revelation, the harsh reality of his father's expectations loomed large. Such pressure was far from resolved, and an unsettling thought faded into view, a question they were both momentarily ignoring. What would happen when the comfort of support met the brutal honesty of their ambitions? The air felt charged with a tension that sought resolution, as their ambitions collided with the external forces that had held them captive for so long. The stakes were crystal clear. The new path forward would demand sacrifices neither had yet contemplated. As Jonathan finished writing his desires, he turned to Sarah with a newfound intensity in his gaze. What if I can't live up to these dreams? What if I fail? Then we'll fail together, she replied firmly, a fierce conviction igniting within her. Better to have tried and learned than live with regret. Both felt the magnitude of her commitment, and in that moment of raw honesty, the question hovered. Were they prepared to face what could come next? The tentacles of past expectations curled swiftly around their dreams, tugging them in opposite directions, leaving a chasm of uncertainty in the air. Would they be able to step beyond those shadows, or would the fear of retreat dominate their aspirations? With determination threading through her veins, Sarah understood that this was more than just about Jonathan. It was a reflection of her own battle with ambition and autonomy. Somewhere within the disquiet, a single truth resonated above the noise. To find freedom, they had to begin confronting their fears, one step at a time. As they sat amidst their scattered notes, a familiar vibration pierced the moment, slicing through the fragile atmosphere. Jonathan's phone was buzzing again, bearing news that might change everything, lingering like a specter over their newfound resolve. "Do you think I should answer?" he asked, his voice dipped in uncertainty. Sarah's breath hitched. The answer might just tip the scales toward one destiny or another, unraveling all they had begun to weave. Would Jonathan reclaim his narrative, or would he allow outside pressures to dictate their fate? Jonathan's phone continued to vibrate insistently, drawing both their gazes like a moth to a flame. It felt invasive in the charged atmosphere they had carefully begun to construct, a bewitching reminder of the life outside their tiny bubble. The flickering screen displayed his father's name, igniting an immediate conflict within him. Shouldn't he answer? Should he not? Each moment hung heavy with unsaid implications, a microcosm of the larger decision looming before him. Sarah sensed the internal battle brewing within Jonathan, the pull of duty fighting against the burgeoning desire for individuality. "Just take a breath," she suggested gently, her own heart hammering with a mix of expectation and anxiety. "You can do this. No one knows better than you what you need. If you choose to answer, own your decision." Jonathan's eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of defiance ignited within them. He reached for the phone, the tension palpable in the air as he tapped the screen to silence it, opting to let it go to voicemail. There was a sharp intake of breath from Sarah, which he misinterpreted as disappointment. "Is it wrong for me to do this?" he asked, the vulnerability of his voice echoing the tumult inside him. "No, it's not wrong," she countered, her tone firm. "But think deeply about your actions. This is about you claiming your voice. You don't have to be the person everyone expects you to be. This is your moment." It was the kind of encouragement he had rarely allowed himself to embrace, and it startled him. For the first time, he felt as if he led with his true self rather than the strings of expectation. The courage to say no stemmed directly from the reality they were scribbling out together moments before, a manifesto of their desires. Against the backdrop of others' impositions, Jonathan exhaled, and with it, a deep release of tension flooded through him. "I really want to travel Europe," he finally admitted, the words spilling out as if they had been held captive until now. "But I don't know if I can just disappear." "Why not?" Sarah pressed, her enthusiasm palpable. "Why can't you? It's about facing that fear head-on. What's holding you back? Your father? His expectations?" Guilt spiked within Jonathan at the mere thought. "If I leave, everything will crumble. My family's hopes, their plans." The weight of those unfulfilled ambitions pressed on him again. But now, standing in Sarah's presence, he began to see a fissure in the facade. "Or maybe you would just be giving yourself the chance to step into your own life," she countered, her eyes sparking with determination. "You can do this, Jonathan. This is about more than just your dreams. It's about who you are destined to become." The room grew thick with possibility, and instead of finding comfort in reassuring thoughts, Jonathan anticipated the potential of a fully realized self. He felt exhausted by the relentless cycle of expectations that dulled his spirit. If he chose to act on his desires, it would mean breaking free of these long-standing binds. But then doubt crept back in, its whisper steady. What if he embarked on this journey and it changed everything? What if he stumbled and fell? "Sarah, what if this dream leads me nowhere? What if I fail miserably?" His voice trembled, reflecting the upheaval in his heart. "Then you'll fail, and you'll stand up again," she supplied, her conviction steady. "A life lived without pursuing your passions is far worse than the risk of failure. Can you trust that losing is part of learning? That missteps only refine you?" Those words struck him deeply. He realized her belief wasn't just in him, but mirrored in her willingness to take risks for herself, for them. It was a reassurance, a promise that fueled the fragile embers of his ambition. He took another deep breath, allowing a hint of optimism to creep in. "So, what do I do?" Sarah smiled, an infectious enthusiasm igniting between them. "We start planning that trip, just like we did with the list. You collect ideas, you gather dreams, and watch them take shape." He nodded, excitement tinging his uncertainty. This wasn't just a fantasy, it was becoming a plan. But just as potential surged within him, the phone buzzed again, harsh and insistent, a reminder that the specter of his father's expectations still loomed. Sarah watched the conflict rippling through him as the reality of his decision solidified. "Answer it," she urged, her voice a low, steady anchor. "Face him on your own terms." With the looming phone call, the moment felt precariously balanced on the edge of future possibilities. Would Jonathan choose to script his story, or would he allow the past to reel him back into its familiar coils? As Jonathan weighed his decision, time stretched, and the path of his life shimmered ahead like a road of uncharted terrain, one filled with more questions than answers. And in that moment of reckoning, amidst the emotional storm encircling them, a single thought cut through. The time had come to face the reality he had long avoided, a truth that might shift the foundation of everything he believed about himself and everything he thought he could achieve. The weight of the phone pressed heavily against Jonathan's palm, its persistent vibration tethering him to the life he feared, yet felt obligated to uphold. Time slowed, stretching the seconds into an abstract fog of uncertainty. Sarah's gaze provided a stubborn beacon, her steady encouragement coaxing him forward, challenging the invisible chains that bound him. "Just breathe," she murmured again, though in that moment Jonathan felt the walls closing in, the din of his father's voice already echoing in his mind, thick with disappointment. The years of expectation coursed through him like a relentless tide, pulling him back toward an identity he was desperately trying to escape. With a punctuated determination, he pressed the button, and the screen illuminated, revealing a desperate voicemail icon. His heart raced. It could be a trap, another snare meant to drag him back into the mold his father had poured for him. But there was a flicker of resolve igniting in him. Perhaps it was time to redefine the narrative. "Okay," he declared suddenly, surprising even himself. He dropped the phone onto the table, allowing it to buzz uninterrupted. I'll take this journey. I have to. I want to believe I'm more than a repository of my family's ambitions. Sarah smiled, that warmth sullying the chill of doubt that loomed over him. That's a start, Jonathan. It means you're ready to explore who you are without their shadows. Standing there, with the echoes of potential swirling around them, Jonathan felt a surge of energy. He could picture himself mapping out routes across Europe, a backpack slung over his shoulder, the chance to carve out a space for himself amidst ancient cities and untold stories. He imagined late nights in bustling cafes, exchanging ideas with strangers, the kind of moments that could reshape a life. But as excitement coursed through him, the specter of failure loomed larger. But what if I discover I'm not enough? What if I go and this is just another escape? The insecurities leapt into his head, each one a jagged boundary he feared to cross. Whether you fail or succeed doesn't define you. There was a fierce intensity in Sarah's gaze that anchored his swirling thoughts. It's about living authentically, about crafting your narrative instead of letting someone else write it for you. You're not just running away, you're stepping forward. Those words reverberated inside him, sparking a budding clarity that had been long buried. He realized that the fear of failure was nothing compared to the dread of living half a life, bound
to the expectations of others. Yet, with clarity came a deeper question. What exactly did it mean to embrace authenticity? Nothing had prepared him for a life that epitomized freedom, where he could explore who he was and what he truly wanted without reservation. He felt a tremor of urgency within, igniting the embers of his aspirations. What if I made a list, a true manifesto of my desires, he proposed, his voice steadying as he spoke. What if I mapped out what I want to explore, each country, each experience? I love that idea, Sarah replied, eyes sparkling with excitement. We can list not just places, but activities too. You could immerse yourself completely in every culture. Pulled by a mix of exhilaration and fear, they began exchanging ideas, crafting an itinerary woven with dreams. Jonathan grappled with the reality of the trip. Each entry became a confrontation with his insecurities and aspirations alike. Walking along the Seine, tasting pasta in Italy, losing himself in the street markets of Barcelona. Each moment promised an expansion of self that he had long denied. Yet, somewhere in the back of his mind, nagging thoughts echoed. What if his father's call was a harbinger of the life he was leaving behind? Are you ready for the fallout? Sarah's question pierced him with unexpected clarity. The thought of answering his father felt like standing on the precipice of a dizzying cliff. Jonathan's answer was lost in a swell of emotions as the phone buzzed again, the suffocating pull of his old life demanding he return. He needed to decide. Would he embrace the frightening possibility of true independence or retreat to the comforts of expectation? He took a breath, sensing that the moment of defining himself was at hand, the call to action echoing within him. In this brick-laden chamber of decisions, one question loomed large. Was he prepared to face the past to claim his future? Each choice laid before him was a step into the unknown, and with that, a crescendo of risk and reward pulsed through his veins, drawing him closer to the cliff's edge. Would he leap, or would he retreat into a life that no longer served him? The screen blinked as the call cut off, sending Jonathan into deeper contemplation about the worth of risk, the moment of reckoning arriving whether he was ready or not. Jonathan sat in silence, the air thick with anticipation. He could still feel the aftershock of his pulse in his fingertips, the uncertainty of his decision framing every thought. Sarah continued to watch him, her presence a steadying force. But now the excitement of planning was tinged with an impending reality he couldn't quite ignore. With every moment that passed, he felt the weight of expectation bearing down on him. He had thought he was moving toward liberation, but instead he grappled with an ever-familiar dread. What if he stumbled? What if he ended up becoming a mere reflection of everything he wanted to avoid? The screen blinked as the call cut off, sending Jonathan into deeper contemplation about the worth of risk, the moment of reckoning arriving whether he was ready or not. Jonathan sat in silence, the air thick with anticipation. He could still feel the aftershock of his pulse in his fingertips, the uncertainty of his decision framing every thought. Sarah continued to watch him, her presence a steadying force. But now the excitement of planning was tinged with an impending reality he couldn't quite ignore. With every moment that passed, he felt the weight of expectation bearing down on him. He had thought he was moving toward liberation, but instead he grappled with an ever-familiar dread. What if he stumbled? What if he ended up becoming a mere reflection of everything he wanted to avoid? His hand instinctively brushed against the remaining bits of his father's influence, the tailored suit hanging in the closet, the framed degrees lined up like trophies, the looming specter of the family business, always restless in the background. Leaving felt much less like a journey and more like a fracture, an unwelcome separation from all he had known. "You know," Jonathan's voice cut through the quiet, revealing an unexpected tremor, "I've never really considered what it might mean to redefine my relationship with my family, let alone my father. All I've known is how to avoid disappointing him, keeping my head down." Sarah nodded empathetically. "It's not about severing ties, Jonathan. It's about establishing boundaries. You have the right to live a life that resonates with who you are, without guilt, without doubt." A revelation hit him. The very notion of success he'd clung to was wrought with the strings of another person's dreams. Perhaps to embrace authenticity meant more than leaving. It meant redefining every part of his life, starting with how he engaged with those expectations. As they mapped out their itinerary, a thought crystallized in his mind. This journey wasn't merely about seeing new places. It was an expedition into his own identity. Every destination could act as a crucible, reshaping his understanding of self. He ran a hand over the blank page in his notebook, ready to transform it into a canvas splashed with his desires and aspirations. "What if I wrote a separate list?" he suggested, the cautious excitement shimmering in his words. "A list filled with things I have always wanted to do, but never allowed myself. Not just travels, but experiences, art, music, diving into the unknown." "Yes," she exclaimed, clearly thrilled with the idea. "Those experiences could offer you insights, and they will allow you to explore who you are beneath those layers of expectation." Jonathan's heart raced at the thought. He envisioned himself standing at the edge of the Eiffel Tower, not just as a tourist, but as someone seeking wonder, his heart open to the possibilities of what could awaken within him. Would it be painting in a sunlit Italian cottage or chatting with local artisans in a bustling market? Each new experience promised a pathway toward self-discovery. But with that excitement lay another pressing question. Would his father ever understand this change? A knot tightened within him. How could he explain this new version of himself to the man who had only ever known him as an extension of his own ambition? "Honestly, I'm terrified of what he might say when we talk," Jonathan admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I can hear his disappointment. It's like a ghost that hasn't realized it's gone." "Fear is a part of growth," Sarah said sagely, her eyes steady. "Leaning into it can teach you more than retreating ever will. Your truth deserves to breathe, even if it stirs some discomfort." Her words resonated deeply. He realized that, perhaps for the first time, he was in control of this narrative. The thought kindled an unexpected flame of courage within. As they shifted back to practicalities of their plan, his mind ran wild with visions of a self he had yet to meet. He scribbled down fleeting thoughts, the taste of adventure mingled with the tang of uncertainty. But just as clarity surged, a familiar pit dropped in his stomach. The looming inevitability of facing his father was inescapable, like a dark cloud looming in his otherwise sunny horizon.
What if this journey didn't erase the pain of those expectations? What if it only amplified the distance between them? Jonathan suppressed a shiver, the ground beneath him seeming to shift. The door was ajar to a world of self-discovery, but could he truly walk through it without losing what was left of his family? The urgency of his decisions pulsed through him, and the next step loomed larger than ever. The phone buzzed again, insistent and demanding. One question remained. Would he gather his resolve to take a leap, or would uncertainty push him backwards into a life that stifled him? Each choice pulled at his core, and he realized the path forward would compel him to confront not just the future, but the ghosts of his past. Jonathan took a deep breath, the weight of his decision lingering in the air. His phone buzzed incessantly, a symbol of the life he was too afraid to abandon. Yet now, faced with the prospect of actualizing his aspirations, he felt the chains of expectation rattling louder than ever. Would he seize this moment for genuine transformation, or allow fear to dictate his future? He didn't want to be just an echo of his father's dreams any longer. This was the decisive hour to carve a path that resonated with his individuality. "Sarah," he began, his voice steadying with each word, "I want to claim my life as my own. I want to redefine what it means to be Jonathan." Her eyes lit up with encouragement, sparking something deep inside him. "That's it. That's what you need to do." Her expression offered an unwavering belief that fueled his desire to embrace the unknown. They spent the next moments intensely scribbling down their hopes and dreams. As Jonathan envisioned roaming through the streets of Paris, tasting fresh pasta in Italy, and diving into uncharted waters in Greece, he felt a renewed sense of agency steering him forward. This journey was no longer just about travel, it was an expedition toward his authentic self. With each passing entry on the list, the thrum of fear transformed into exhilaration. Memories of his father's expectations lingered in the background, but they began to fade in the shadow of something new, his own vision coming to life. Let's frame this trip not just as an escape, but as growth. It's about exploring who we are beyond the roles we've been given, Sarah suggested, her enthusiasm palpable. "Right. I want everything to serve as a means to
Reclaim my identity," he responded, his voice swelling with confidence. "I don't just want to travel as a character in someone else's narrative, I want to write my own." The act of creating their lists ignited a flame within Jonathan. Each destination on the page represented a chance at growth, an opportunity to shed layers of imposed identity. He felt himself standing at the precipice of a great leap, with each plan forging a bridge toward newfound freedom. But lurking in the corners of his mind, an unrelenting question lingered. How would he confront his father about this forthcoming journey? What if his decisions shattered the fragile structure built through years of expectations? "You have to be prepared for the reality when you connect those dots," Sarah urged, her voice soft yet resolute. "It will be hard, but that's how you'll find your true strength. You have to align yourself with what matters to you." Jonathan nodded, feeling the gravity of her words. This was not merely about rejecting his father's dreams. It was about shaping his own destiny, even if it meant dismantling the familiar. A renewed sense of purpose surged through him, fortifying his resolve. "Let's plan for that conversation. I need to prepare myself for the possibility that it won't go how I want," he said, a pragmatic edge grounding his thoughts. Together, they sketched out a strategy, an outline of what Jonathan would articulate, the needs he would express, and how he planned to frame his desires as growth opportunities rather than betrayals. Armed with clarity and intention, Jonathan felt a strain of hope mingling with the tension in his gut. While risking confrontation with his father was daunting, he'd accept whatever came next. In every ending lay the seed for a new beginning. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, her steady gaze focused on him. "More than ever. I'm ready to pursue everything I've ever wanted," he proclaimed,
his voice a beacon of defiance against the shadows of doubt. "I'm ready to emerge as my own person." The tension dissipated in the air, replaced by a vibrant anticipation. Jonathan felt alive, fully present in this moment of awakening. He was no longer paralyzed by the fear of failure. Instead, he was embracing a vast landscape of possibilities where he could redefine success on his terms. As they finalized their plans, Jonathan's heart pounded with purpose. He could see himself stepping into every new experience with unabashed courage and vulnerable truth. This was his story to narrate, and the ink was in his hands. And with that, he silenced his phone. "Let it ring. I won't let fear dictate my life any longer," he declared with finality. In that moment, Jonathan stepped boldly onto the road of authenticity, ready to claim his independence and design a life that resonated with his true self. He had a profound realization. Within the uncertainty lay his ultimate freedom. Sarah smiled, recognition illuminating her face. They were partners in this journey, individuals forging their paths, both confronting their fears, yet determined not to be shackled by them. "Here's to new beginnings," she said, raising an imaginary glass. "Here's to us," he replied, brimming with confidence and a deep sense of accomplishment. Together, they were poised to embark on a transformative adventure, seeking self-discovery, authenticity, and a future filled with potential. This was just the beginning. As the day faded, Jonathan felt an overwhelming sense of readiness washing over him. He embraced the unknown, lifted by an unshakable determination to reclaim not only his life, but the essence of who he was meant to be. Leaving old expectations behind, he stepped forward, knowing his journey was a bright horizon of opportunities awaiting him. Now, dear viewers, this is your moment to act. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for these profound journeys. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jonathan's transformative journey. And you need to share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the inspiration of self-discovery and growth.